Okay, yeah, they're in now. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Can you hear us now? Felicia, can you hear?
Hi, everyone. Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
We've been trying to talk to you guys. We didn't know we were doing something wrong. Okay, thank you so much. We have two more speakers that have not yet joined, and so we have just 1 more minute, 2 more minutes, I believe, to go. So we might just start and then they join us. We'll see when they join us. So hello everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us today for this webinar. We hope that you have an exciting time, like I'm sure we're going to have. The guests have been taking so much time to prepare for this event. Today, a lot of people have talked about the title not being very clear. Yes, we want to look at actually the financial challenges and the difficulties in women securing finance for their businesses, which actually even makes their entrepreneuring even more challenging for them. So we're going to start off with Felicia. Felicia is from the We Free Women Entrepreneurship Finance Institute in the World Bank. And she has kindly agreed to come talk to us about their amazing work that they've been doing. We're trying to finance women. And afterwards, then we'll hear from all our guests about the situations in the different countries that they represent. So, Felicia, I've made you presenter, so you can go ahead and start.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me to this webinar. I'm Felicia Siegrist, and I lead the knowledge and research agenda at the Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative at the World Bank. And the Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative, short WEFI, is a multilateral fund that supports women entrepreneurs in emerging markets with a special focus on small and medium enterprises. And I'm going to share a presentation at this point. 1 second. Please let me know if you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
We can see it, Felicia.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, but before I'm gonna explain you more about WeFi, I would like to tell the story of Yetunde Adeyemi. Yetunde is the founder and managing director of Active Foods, a commercial bakery based in Nigeria. Yetunde started Active Foods in 2015, and it started as a flour business basically, and then diversified into a lot of different products like butter, sugar, rice, so on. Yetunde started her business with 7 employees, and today there are over 300 people employed. So I met Yetunde in 2022, and I was really impressed by her dedication and drive, and it was just very inspiring to talk to her. So she's a really great entrepreneur and a great success story. But when Yetunde started her business, and in order to scale it, she struggled accessing financing, in particular credit, due to very strict collateral requirements. Actually, many women do not own assets that can be used as collateral due to limited property ownership rights or social norms. And especially during COVID, it was difficult for Yetunde to access new financing to grow her business. And the story of Yetunde is not a unique case. There are many women who see entrepreneurship as a path to economic empowerment. Actually, the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor data shows that 17% of women in emerging markets are entrepreneurs already, while 35% of women in developing countries aspire to do so. That means that over half of women in emerging markets actually see entrepreneurship as a path to economic empowerment. But as I said, they usually face significant barriers. In many countries, also African countries, legal and regulatory constraints, as well as social norms, not only hinder women entrepreneurs like Yetunde from owning and inheriting property, but also from registering a business, opening a bank account, and simply like obtaining an identification card. Worldwide, 115 countries, there are 115 countries where women face legal constraints to entrepreneurship, which is a lot. And only 14 countries actually give women the very same rights as men. Women's business growth is also restricted by other factors like gender norms or care responsibilities. For example, women spend 3 to 5 times more time on care and domestic work duties as men. And this, of course, limits the amount of time they can dedicate to their businesses and often requires them as well to stay home and operate their businesses from home. And access to finance is a big constraint to many women entrepreneurs. Accessing finance is particularly difficult for women entrepreneurs in the so-called missing middle. These are enterprises that are too big for micro-enterprise or microfinance institutions to be served, and also informal investors, for example, but they're also too small and risky for banks or venture capital firms. So IFC actually estimates that globally, 70% of women-led SMEs are underserved by financial institutions. This gender financing gap not only exists in debt financing, but also in the equity financing space. Women-owned and led startups raise much less funding, and if they do, it's usually angel or grant money, and rather than VC capital. In emerging markets, only 11% of seed venture capital flows into women-owned startups. Here, gender biases play a big role, and investors believe that women-led SMEs are riskier. And here as well, one issue is that only 8% of investors in emerging markets are actually women. Another factor that holds women entrepreneurs back is their limited access to knowledge, skills, technology, and networks. For example, a global study from the Global Accelerator Learning Initiative, GALI, showed that only 13% of founding teams participating in accelerators were made up entirely of women. And so these constraints, like the legal system, social norms, and investor biases, have an important impact on the business performance and productivity of women entrepreneurs. So actually, there are studies which show that there are 25% less women than men who start businesses, and there is a 36% growth gap and around 50% profit gap. Furthermore, there are many women entrepreneurs that are in the informal economy or low margin industries like retail, education, social services, or tourism. So what can we do? What do you think can be done? Now I'm going to explain you a bit more what we do at WeFi and also present you some innovative solutions and projects that address these constraints. And as I said, the challenges and constraints are usually multiple and interconnected. So that's why at WeFi we follow an ecosystem approach, trying to tackle those constraints simultaneously. And we have 4 main focus areas. The first is access to finance. So here we work with banks, venture capital firms, insurance companies to help women SMEs access financing, including debt, equity, and insurance. The second pillar is around access to skills and networks. So here we work with accelerators, incubators, but all kind of training providers to build the capacity of women entrepreneurs and also connecting them to mentors and important networks. The third pillar is around access to markets. So here we work with corporates on one side, but also governments to help women-led SMEs gain access to international or regional value chains and also public procurement. And then the last pillar is what we call enabling environment. So here we work with governments mainly and regulators to tackle those legal and regulatory constraints to overall create a better enabling environment for women entrepreneurs. And you can see that WIFI really has a global reach, working with public and the private sector, but really implementing its projects locally by local partners. So WIFI programs are actually implemented by the 6 multilateral development banks, but they again work with local organizations on the ground to deliver those services to women entrepreneurs. And through our programs, WIFI has supported more than 170,000 women-led SMEs in more than 67 countries with more than 400 partner organizations. And you can see on the slide that most of the funding, WIFI funding, goes into access to finance interventions. But these are supported by other interventions in the other focus areas, as I mentioned. But so how do we create opportunities for women to gain access to finance, skills, markets, and so on? WIFI has over 200 projects, and I would like to highlight just a few, which I find particularly interesting in this context. So alternative funding options like crowdfunding or digital finance are an opportunity, particularly for women entrepreneurs. For example, digital financial innovations like digital cash flow-based lending has shown some promising results as alternative to collateral. In Nigeria, for example, WIFI developed and piloted a cash flow-based lending product that uses cash flow data to determine the creditworthiness of women-led SMEs instead of requiring collateral from them. So this innovative product actually also enabled Yetunde and other women entrepreneurs to access a loan during the pandemic. She received two loans from Axis Bank, which enabled her to scale her business and create new jobs. WIFI also works in the equity financing space to close the gender gap there, or work towards closing the gender gap. Although countries like Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, and Egypt are seeing a rise in tech entrepreneurship in particular, the pool of African angel investor and venture capital funds is still limited, especially the ones who apply a gender lens. For example, WIFI invests in different venture capital funds. One of them is Tide Africa, where we apply so-called performance-based incentives. These are financial rewards that we provide to venture capital firms to kind of incentivize them to increase the number of women-led startups in their portfolio or pipeline. So that means, for example, if we say the goal is to increase the number of women-led startups in the portfolio by 20%, and they reach this 20%, we will pay an incentive payment of, say, 100K, for example, just as an example. So such performance-based incentives are quite an innovative instrument in blended finance, which means using public financing to leverage private capital. And we also have many projects where we use performance-based incentives with banks. For example, a bank in Vienna. And here we use these incentives to kind of reduce the risk for banks for lending to women-led SMEs. And many of those projects also include capacity building components where we work with financial institutions to improve and innovate their products and services to better meet the needs of women-led startups and SMEs. Other projects include, for example, the Brave Women in Burkina Faso. So here we work with different training providers to provide business training and grants to women-led SMEs in fragile contexts to create more new business opportunities and employment. Then in Kenya, in regard to access to markets, we have a project called Sourcing to Equal. Here we work with corporates to help them apply a gender lens to their procurement processes. And we also work with women-led SMEs to help them better understand what these requirements are and how to better engage with the buyers. Similarly, in Senegal, we work with governments to train civil servants on improving their engagement with women-led SMEs and apply more gender-responsive procurement processes. And finally, WeFi just launched a new initiative called the WeFinance Code. So the WeFinance Code is a multilateral or multi-stakeholder effort that really focuses on systemic change and with a main focus on how to improve the collection and use of sex-segregated data, because this is also a big issue that there is not enough gender data available to actually understand the constraints of women-led SMEs and design better programs based on this data. So we are rolling out the WeFinance Code in 26 countries worldwide, among them Mozambique, Somalia, Madagascar, Nigeria, and Rwanda as well. And as I said, it's really a systems change effort that will help build a community of champions, improve the availability of sex-segregated data and increase activities to close financing gaps for women-led SMEs. And I will share some links later in the chat. So why is it important to have more women entrepreneurs? Women's entrepreneurship is really critical for women's economic empowerment and economic growth. It's a key factor for overall growth, prosperity, and innovation. For example, $5 to $6 trillion could be added to the global economy if women started and scaled businesses at the same rate as men. Women entrepreneurs are also important to drive employment opportunities, especially for other women. Women tend to employ 6 times more women. And finally, women entrepreneurs are also critical to drive innovation and the development of new, innovative, and also gender-sensitive solutions to global challenges like climate change. For example, there is a study that shows that if there are at least 30% women on a company's board, this improves climate governance, innovation, and and actually lowers the growth rate of emissions. So as a key takeaway, I would like to highlight 3 points. One, the importance of innovative financing instruments like blended finance and performance-based incentives to unlock private capital and get more money into the hands of women entrepreneurs. Second, to move more women into high growth entrepreneurship and high growth sectors like tech and financing. And what does this mean? This means that we need to bring more women into STEM, and we also need to work on structural barriers like gender biases and stereotypes. And lastly, the third point is around systemic change and the collection of sex-segregated data to better understand the challenges of women entrepreneurs and how we can design more effective support programs. So thank you very much, and I'm very looking forward to hearing from other speakers on specific challenges in their countries. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for the presentation, Felicia. Thank you. And like I said earlier, we're not going to follow any specific structure, but we're going to pick up from how the discussion is going. And something really struck me from your presentation just now. I didn't see any mention of South Africa in the presentation. And I want to, most of the countries that have been covered so far, you can see that economically, they're not as economically independent, or if I may use that word, as South Africa. So I want to ask Elona, is it that in South Africa, we don't have this challenge of financing women in South Africa? Is that why I haven't seen from the work that the World Bank is doing that they don't seem to have so much big presence in helping women in South Africa? Or is it that the South African government has a system in place to support women entrepreneurship?
Thank you. Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. Definitely not, Bridget. South African women entrepreneurs still face a lot of challenges, and challenges with sustainability of their businesses. If we just look at, for example, the key sectors, you have agriculture as one of the main sectors that drive the economy, but women are under-resourced, underrepresented. You have very few. We go in many meetings and you only have about 2 women farmers that are mentioned almost everywhere. So we have a problem of representation. We have a problem of duplication. So you find 1 or 2 or 3 successful women are multi-funded because they've made it over a certain threshold and they've gained trust from potential funders and so on. But on the whole, we still have a lot of challenges that specifically face women entrepreneurs across all sectors.
So Felicia, is there any specific reason why South Africa is not such a big mention in your work? Is it access? Is it a problem of access?
No, there is actually no specific reasons, and the project examples that I mentioned are really just a few that I picked based on the challenges that I mentioned earlier. But we have, as I said, we have over 200 projects, and we mainly focus on countries in middle and low income settings, and also in fragile contexts. So I'm going to share in the chat the link to our annual report, and in the annex you can actually find a list of all the projects that we are doing, and this description of it.
Okay, so I'm coming back again to South Africa then, so that you can tell us, Elona, in terms of South Africa, what is this the landscape like for financing for women entrepreneurs?
I think there is a few funds which are women specific. So I wouldn't say it's all doom and gloom. The government and the private sector is trying to accelerate women entrepreneurship. So you still have You have UN Women that's quite active in a lot of sectors to try and partner with accelerators and incubation programs. You have women-specific funding from public sector. However, there is, I think, a specific approach to developing women entrepreneurs that's not uniform across the ground. Looking at some of the socioeconomic and psychosocial problems that women entrepreneurs face, there isn't many programs that are custom made for that. And that's already a barrier for them to get over in order for them to access and meet the criteria for some of the funding. So I think there's progress, but it's not as much. As we know, women are multipliers, I think, across Africa. So the few women that you see that do get the finance, you see, and the support that goes with the finance, I think you do see them accelerate and grow and take others with them. But there's just not enough. I don't think we've made enough progress.
Okay. So Khadijat, can you tell us about the Gambian situation then? You're mute.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Bridget, for this opportunity to speak on such an important platform, but also a very important topic. And I'd like to say a big thank you to the speakers here today, as well as the audience. In terms of the Gambia, before I start talking about some of the challenges, it might be useful to give a little bit of background of, the country, the Gambia. So the Gambia is a very small country in West Africa. So if you look at the map of Africa, you might not even be able to see the Gambia because it's a very small country that is surrounded by Senegal. And interestingly, in the Gambia, if you look at the total population composition, the GBA census shows that about 51% of our total population are women and girls. And if we look at this, the composition of the SMEs in the Gambia, 34% of all SMEs in the Gambia are owned by women. But interestingly, most of these women-owned businesses are micro businesses, and most are within the informal sector. In terms of the nature of business activities that women in the Gambia are involved in, it's mostly agricultural activities around food production, gardening, vegetable production, fisheries. You tend to see a lot of challenges in the Gambia in terms of, women's entrepreneurship. That's very similar to some of the issues that Felicia mentioned. Specifically, one of the challenges we're having, especially given the nature of entrepreneurial activities that women in the Gambia are involved in, is that the Gambia is one of the few countries that doesn't have a land policy. We have this, should I say, customary land tenure system, which doesn't necessarily favor women. So women may have access to using land, but they don't have rights to land ownership. And this causes challenges, especially when they want to access traditional sources of finance, such as, banking, because they will need to provide some sort of collateral. So it has that ripple effect. But there are also several other challenges, one of which has to do with women having to simultaneously manage their domestic responsibilities with business responsibilities. Another challenge that has been mentioned by the previous speakers is in terms of the difficulty for women to access physical, human, as well as social capital. What you tend to see amongst women in the Gambia, entrepreneurs, is we tend to mostly network with people that are, like-minded individuals to us, and that can limit us in terms of creativity, as well as think about opportunities that could be for, business growth purposes. In addition to that, I see a limitedness in terms of the way in which entrepreneurship support system or environment is approached. So generally, I would say it's more, we tend to lack an economic ecosystem approach to fostering entrepreneurship. So you would see in different government departments or units, for example, GAIPA and other ministries, doing entrepreneurial activities within the ministries or departments to support women entrepreneurship. But at a central level, there's some sort of a limited or lack of coordination and that systemic approach to encouraging entrepreneurship amongst women in the Gambia.
Okay, thank you so much. Agriculture seems to be coming up a lot in these discussions. I want to ask also, from the Nigerian perspective, Mrs. Adeyeye, is it the same thing in Nigeria that we have such a big focus of women entrepreneurship in the agricultural sector? And what is the support structure like for them there?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Irene, and thank you very much for having me here to contribute to the discussion today. Also building on what my previous discussants have said, on what Elona and Khadija too have said, I think the same situation cuts across many parts of Africa. Although I'm sure we all know that Nigeria is a very big country in terms of population, is a very big country. And it is a country that should have had what we call the demographic dividends, based on a lot of potential that we have in the country. Also, in terms of the resources, talk of human resources, talk of natural resources. Nigeria should really be a big model in Africa in terms of entrepreneurship and in all aspects. And talking in terms of agriculture and the opportunity, entrepreneurship opportunity presented in food systems for us to really empower women. Yes, there are lots of opportunity in food systems entrepreneurship for Nigerian women, but it's as if I would say the concept is as there's opportunity, but are we harnessing the opportunity? Are we making use of the opportunity? I was happy when Felicia was talking, so many programs in Nigeria, but, are they translating to the kind of development that we want? Are we looking, is it inclusive? Because when we talk of women is not just, homogeneous. We have women across different levels. And, in Nigeria, there's a lot of diversity. There's a lot of diversity in Nigeria. So there are different programs on ground now that, are in place to harness women's entrepreneurship in the food systems. The current the National Gender Policy of Nigeria is there. The MSME, medium scale entrepreneurship is there. The different work that the Development Bank of Nigeria is doing, Felicia mentioned some of them. There are so many platforms, but I still want to say that we still need to do more in African countries, especially in countries like Nigeria, where we have, a lot of potential for demographic dividends that we can harness the power of women. There is this platform, but are we using the right approach for us to really bring women into entrepreneurship and even to increase, the proportion of women entrepreneurs that we have? Let me give you an instance. We need to do systemic approach, and I think Khadija talked about that. We can't just approach it from just a single level. We need to look at all the different levels, look at it from the individual level, look at it from, the household level, the societal level, and even the environmental structural level. That is where we can have results. If we take a single way approach, we will not get the results that we want. So we have to consider all these different levels, then revisit the different approaches that we are using, revisit the different platforms, especially in Nigeria that we have now, and look at it from a systemic approach. And again, part of what I would say is that maybe our discussion will still come back to that. What are the factors, promoting these issues? I'm sure we all know that there are structural factors, there are underlying issues. Why do women not have access to resources? Why do they not have access to fund? Why do they not have enough agency to, to harness the potential of the food system, the agricultural food system, to empower women and build up their entrepreneurship? So there are a lot of issues. So in Nigeria, we have platforms for empowering women in agriculture, but are we using the right approach? We need to look at the approach again and then revisit this approach and then put in place proper mechanism to ensure that we are inclusive and we reach out to all women, irrespective of the different classes where they are.
Thank you. I'm going to come now to Sarah. We're coming back now because Sarah's research has mostly been in the UK, where the experience is totally different. Because you see, most of the places where we have these challenges are countries where the GDP is low. They're not as developed economically as other Western countries. But even there in Europe also, there's still areas where women have challenges also accessing finance. So we're going to hear from Sarah from her research, what has been the experience for women in the UK. Sarah?
Thank you very much, Bridget. And hello, everybody, and hello to fellow speakers. It's been really interesting hearing what you've been saying. I've been adding some notes. And Bridget, some of the things I'm going to be picking up on will show that although the context may be different, some of those themes that the other speakers have raised are actually very similar in the UK. And speaking firstly to something that Adeye was saying about Nigeria, is that the UK is a very diverse country. We have a lot of ethnic and class diversity. And so, and, you know, I don't know about farmers because my research has often been in London and there aren't very many farmers in London, I have to say. But what we do have in London is about 40% of the population in London are not white. It's about 20% of the population over the whole of the UK. And in addition to that, the UK has a really, I mean, we may disguise this, but as some of you will, there is a big hierarchy, a sort of class-based hierarchy. We have a system that means that there are elites who have access to better schools, to better universities, to social networks, those things that Khadija was talking about, who will have very different kind of human and social kind of contacts and things. And that we're seeing that makes a huge difference in terms of women's entrepreneurial experiences and their outcomes. So what there is, and there has been in the UK, is a dedicated focus on trying to encourage more women to open businesses for at least 20 years. There have been successive programmes from successive governments that have tried to look at what we need to build a sort of pro-female entrepreneurial ecosystem. And if you were just looking in terms of women opening businesses, you could say there has been some success there. So I think the overall rate of women-owned businesses in the UK has risen from about sort of 12% to about 20%. So probably about 1 in 5 of businesses in the UK are owned by women. But then when you have a look down, if you dig down into those figures, many of those businesses are very small, although let's face it, 90% of businesses are very small, regardless of whether they're, owned and run by men or women. So these problems aren't just for women, but a lot of them are sort of run by they're sort of self-employed businesses, not employing people. And they tend to be in sectors that, like you have been saying, I think, just reflect sort of other gendered structures across the workforce. So although we don't have, agriculture is not such an important part of the UK economy, there's a lot of women in retail, in sort of like services, in those very sort of crowded areas where it's quite difficult to make a profit. And I think this is one of the other issues that I would say is one of the main problems that doesn't get talked about enough in the sort of entrepreneurial ecosystem, is that it's easy to open a business in the UK. It's pretty simple. And when I tell my students how easy it is to sort of go and register a business, that's easy. And it's also easy to get small amounts of funding. And there's a couple of funding programs, which I'm going to put some links up, which have actually been quite successful at addressing those issues of people who don't have collateral. It's very difficult to start a business in the UK that actually can provide a sustaining income. That means that replaces, an employment job. So one of the questions that I think is really interesting to ask for all of us who are sort of involved in this kind of area is encouraging more women into entrepreneurship, is it actually good? Is it good for equality? Is it good for sort of women's futures? So some research I did recently in London, and at the time, the average salary in London was £33,000 a year for women. I mean, that's across the whole of the London thing. Out of 52 women entrepreneurs that I interviewed, only 4 were earning more than that. And many of these were women who had previously in the employment sector, when they had been employed in salaried work, had been earning that. So that's an issue. Can entrepreneurship actually provide sustaining incomes in this kind of context? And who is able to do it? Is it only women who have got those kind of elite networks? Or is it all women? So that's sort of one of the things that I think is an issue for the UK, and something else that I'd be interested in hearing about from the other fellow panelists is there is a very strong cultural discourse in sort of the UK that suggests that women should be, economically active, that they should be going out and fulfilling themselves. They should be, finding these jobs and looking after their kids as well. So that doesn't change whether you're in the UK or in other countries. Somebody's still got to look after the baby and enjoy doing it as well.
That's one of the questions that we have in the already in the chat, which I'm going to come back to. But quickly, Felicia, given the amount of work you've done in all of these countries, is there a common thread in the reasons why the corporate organizations or banks are really not financing as much women as they finance the men? Is there any common thread in all of these countries that we can say this is the main reason? And is that gender-based, or does it have to do with the level of skills or the perception of capabilities that the banks consider the women to have in terms of running their business?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I would say the main reason why banks and other financial institutions are not focusing enough on women entrepreneurs or women, the female segment in general, is that there is a lack of awareness, I would say, on the lack of sex segregated data. Again, they don't have enough data that kind of proves the business case, because it's a bit sad, but in this corporate world, right, it's all about profits. So they need to see the business case somehow, and if they don't have the data, they can't show that actually that's a profitable business for them, for these banks and venture capitalists and everyone. So I think first of all it's about data, but then also most CEOs and corporate leaders are men. So of course there are also a lot of gender stereotypes and biases in the play. Also what I said, in emerging markets there are only 8% female investors. That's also a huge problem, because there's actually evidence that shows that women investors tend to invest more into women-led startups. And they outperform men-led startups, actually. So I guess that's also something we need to tackle from the supply side, right? And something I want to pick up on, which I think Adeya shared before, is that when we speak about women entrepreneurs, it's really not, we should not see them as a homogeneous group. They're not all the same. Women women entrepreneurs have a variety of motivations, entrepreneurial journeys, financial and non-financial needs, and really different experiences in accessing resources that we should consider when thinking about how they can best approach financial institutions like banks or venture capitalists. And that's why it's also incredibly important to distinguish between those micro enterprises and like in the informal sector or more like livelihood sustaining enterprises versus growth-oriented SMEs, where WeFi focuses on, and high-growth startups, because they have very different needs in terms of financing and also like non-financial needs.
Okay, so which also brings me to the next question then. Is it, if that is the case, is it that we need to rethink the kind of support that we give to women then? Is it better to provide support that helps them to keep records of their business dealings so that we can have enough data, which the banks are looking for in order to finance them? So most of the women in agriculture don't have the skills to keep these business records that are required. Should we rethink our support to include these kind of support that empowers them to begin to keep such records? Anyone can answer, any of the panelists.
I think I'll go. I think I want to say, so I'm an entrepreneurial coach and also coach executives in corporate. And what I've noticed with women, both established entrepreneurs, established career women, is what cuts across is that one of the main determinants of success is the support that they have. The support at home, when things are stable at home, they focus in on their business, and that passion drives through. But for entrepreneurs, that type of systemic and holistic approach is very important, because there are some things that are so basic. If we as practitioners who are developing entrepreneurs know that the banks need this, why not work backwards and support the women to meet at least the standards of the funding that they're targeting? Most times also women lack, what do I want to say? That thing of let me try and see what happens. We wait until all our ducks are in the row. And even if there's 0.5% of the requirements that they don't meet, most of them will not apply until they're absolutely sure that I have everything. And some of them just have a belief that I won't qualify, and the fear of failure gets in the way. And yet those programs and those fundings are actually provisioned for women entrepreneurs. So I think there is something to say about the mindset, the obstacles and the limiting beliefs that lie in the women, which is not necessarily the funding and the funders problem, but it is systemic. It is to speak to all the challenges that they face societally. Some of it, you don't know it, so you don't know how to develop it as an entrepreneur. So I think really partnering the support that we give, the funding that we give with some sort of support would go a long way in ensuring that it's quite sustainable. You have sustained use and multiplication of that funding that you give, because yes, you establish the business is running. And like Sarah said, it is very easy to open a business also in South Africa because our banking system and all those systems are working. But the problem is sustaining that business, sustaining it beyond 3 to 5 years, and actually starting to employ other people. A lot of those small businesses remain self-employed type of businesses. And I think when it's coming from a funding perspective, there's a hope that those businesses will start to employ more people, will multiply and scale up. And that's usually, we don't see a lot of that.
Okay, so again, in terms of the support structures and all of the issues that we have there, I want to use Nigeria particularly as an example, and I think maybe Dr. Adeya, you can bear witness to this. Within Nigerian system, even the most educated of women that are also doing businesses that even have some of this collateral that the banks require still don't get funding, still don't get the support that they need. Now, is it because of lack of belief in not on the women's side, but on the bank side, on the women's abilities to actually be successful in that business? Do you think that also plays a role in their unwillingness to finance women or take a risk on women?
Yes, I think building on what Elona just finished, looking at the strategy for improving women entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial activities, we need to take a holistic approach to it, because the essence is for us to make sure that whatever strategy that we use, that it works. So it's not just about, focusing on developing women, engaging them, improving their skills. It has to go beyond that. It has to go beyond that. We need to take, approach that we address their skills. We need to take approach that we address even relational issues, engaging the men, maybe their spouses or partners, and even approaches that we talk about enabling. Hello? Okay. Approaches that we talk about, addressing the structural issues that we face. So for women, for instance, looking at the case of Nigeria, as you have said, that is it the issue? Is it coming from women? Is it coming from even maybe the government agency or structural issue? I'd like to the angle that I see it from is that it is coming from both angles, both from the women and from even the partners, the structural partners, the stakeholders that they are working with. Women, from the fact that the mindset, in the process of socialization, in what we learn as girls, in what we learn becoming women, our mindset has been affected even from when we were girls, that, this is what you can do as a woman. This is what you can do as a girl. So this, we learn it, we become women, we want to become entrepreneurs, we still carry that kind of mindset. So if there are no intentional efforts that we work on this kind of mindset, it can affect women's ability, it can affect their ability, to build the real entrepreneur that they are supposed to be. So it is coming from women too, and coming from women because of what the society has taught us in the process of socialization, that as a woman, even women, how many women in Nigeria have big, entrepreneurial set activities that we are talking about? You are limited from the onset. You are limited even from birth, from infants, that this is what you can do. This is how far you can go as a woman. Then also from the angle of the other stakeholders, because even stakeholders, talking of financial institutions, talking of other influencers, government, relevant government agencies, the mindset that they have about women, even some people don't even want to give loans to women. Even the perspective about women entrepreneurs, they will say, oh, women cannot take risk, so we cannot release this fund to them. Women cannot take risk, they cannot do this kind of business. They even limit them in the kind of entrepreneurial engagement that they can do. So this comes from different angles in the society. It's come from different angles. And, we really need to keep putting forward efforts, as we have been saying here today, that it is systemic. So the approach that we want to use should not be just one way. It has also to be systems approach, that we address all the areas where this problem, where the challenges are coming from. I think that is the time that we can really have headway in issue of women entrepreneurship.
So this brings me now to the elephant in the room. Do you think that being a woman is a disadvantage to our entrepreneurial pursuits? Because I've seen some of the questions. One of the questions is directed at Khadija to say, how do women in Gambia balance between running their businesses and maternal family responsibilities? Okay, so do you think the fact that we're women makes it actually, even in terms of even an employment, I've seen these days, even in my current employment, when I was going to start in my startup form, I was asked to indicate in the form if there was any chance that I was going to be pregnant in the next 1 year. So, employers are thinking ahead to say, you're going to fall pregnant, you're going to require maternity leave, and you're going to be away for a period of time. So employing you over a man who is not going to need that kind of thing, obviously you know where the choice is going to be. So if you're talking investing millions on a woman that might take a break because of childbirth, because of family responsibilities, and you're thinking as an investor, what's going to happen to my money when she's away taking care of families? So do we now think that just being a woman is a problem in terms of getting finance? Anyone can answer.
Okay, okay, sorry. I think that is what that is what is happening now. That if we don't continue this effort that we are doing, that is it. That, you know, being a woman, being born as a girl already has placed a lot of limitation on you by the society. And that is not fairness. That is not justice. Being born as a girl should not limit us, but that is what we are experiencing in the society. Immediately you are a woman, there's already a limitation, even from childhood. Even from childhood, because they will tell you, okay, you are a girl, you should be in the kitchen, you are a boy, you can just, we learn from childhood. It starts, you know, to manifest. So that is why we have to, you know, keep up this effort. Like you said, you know, people will tell you they can't employ pregnant women. And if nobody is pregnant, how do we keep on to have the labor force? A woman that is pregnant is doing national service to the country. So it is not a problem to be a woman, but, you know, we need to work through people to change all this perspective and concept that are derogatory and, you know, negative impact on women. I don't like to, it's just so, let me allow the other speakers to talk.
Okay, so Khadija, your hand was up first, and then we'll come back to you, Elona. Khadija too.
I just wanted to say before, like, we go into whether being a woman is some sort of a disadvantage within the entrepreneurial space, is that we need to take a step back a bit. And in taking that step back, we need to recognize the fact that in our countries, or maybe where I come from, the Gambia, we see two forms of entrepreneurship. We see necessity entrepreneurship and opportunity entrepreneurship. Largely, most of the women in entrepreneurship in the Gambia, you would find within the necessity entrepreneurship space. And of course, they are delivering services and providing products that people need within the communities. But if we move on to the question as to whether being a woman is some sort of a disadvantage when it comes to entrepreneurship, I would say it isn't. Now, the reason being, if we go back to the topic, what's the fragility of women's entrepreneurship and its implications for gender equality? Already, we have multiple systems of economic, social, and political systems. And these already had created gender imbalances or gaps. So when I talk of specific things, such as when we look at the space of education and training, historically, women have been lagging behind when it comes to education, when it comes to training, but also in relation to the points that Adeyeye mentioned about some of those structural factors that are limiting women. So if we look at things like there are certain sectors that, you know, traditionally we believe are meant for men as opposed to women. And all these have a ripple effect on constraining women when it comes to their involvement in opportunity-based entrepreneurship as opposed to necessity-based entrepreneurship. So I would say there's some sort of a causal or reverse causality relationship when we look at women in entrepreneurship and gender equality. So women in entrepreneurship has implications of whether there's that gender equality. When I go back to the point that Sarah mentioned when she said they looked at women that were in employment and those that were in entrepreneurship, and there's that that gap when it comes to the income that they make in a year. But also, if our institutional systems are not gendered such that they take into account the differences when it comes to the needs of men and women, and amongst the women recognize the fact that there are differences in terms of their needs, then chances of us getting close to achieving SDG 5 would be very limited. So I would say it doesn't necessarily have to do with the gender, but what sort of enabling environment are we creating such that women and men have equal opportunities to excel, not just when it comes to necessity entrepreneurship, but equally for opportunity entrepreneurship.
But Khadijati, wouldn't you say this is easier said than done, considering our culture, considering the patriarchal nature of our culture and the expectations that people have of women? So going back to the issue of being necessity entrepreneurs, we did do a paper. Joan, I think Joan is here in the group. We did do a research on Nigerian women and the reasons why they go into entrepreneurship. And you find, again, it's one of the questions I'm going to ask towards the end of this discussion. You find that a lot of women don't even want to be entrepreneurs. They want to go and have a regular job, but they have been socialized to feel that family comes first. So when it comes to choosing between a regular career and family, the family trumps. And so when you pick family, you're limited in your choices of career. Anything that takes you further away from home, anything that puts you up there that where you cannot be controlled or seen, limits you. So you're forced to stay back and do entrepreneurship because it becomes the only option that you have in terms of earning a living and getting any economic empowerment. So is it so much as us taking a step back and analyzing the two states, or looking at the institutions that have kept us where we are, that makes us necessity entrepreneurs? In most countries, women are necessity entrepreneurs. And if you look at all the studies on entrepreneurial motivation, you will see one of the reasons the women give is like work-life balance. They have to take care of those babies. They have to keep the home. They have to do all of these things that their gender necessitates for them to do. So is it so much as the structures or the culture then?
I would say I agree with you to some extent that there are limitations, and some of these limitations are created as a result of our customs and belief about what the role of women are in society. Nonetheless, I think when we talk about entrepreneurship, mostly people tend to have that limited view of what entrepreneurship, in the sense that entrepreneurship is about the creation of businesses. But you can have women entrepreneurs, in the sense that you have people that are applying entrepreneurial skills within organizations. So may not necessarily start their own businesses, but they may be serving in very important institutions like the public sector, and in that contributing, towards, economic growth, economic prosperity. But also, when I come back to the point that you raised about whether this is about customs, and how do we, balance this, especially towards supporting women when it comes to opportunity-based entrepreneurship, I would say it is about mindset, but we need to start changing some of these mindsets now. And I would say in the case of the Gambia, we have seen some, changes when it comes to the landscape that, women, or the type of businesses women are involved in. So traditionally, I talked about agricultural activities, but now we've seen women in fashion, we've seen women in IT, although very, not much. But we need to start somewhere to lay some of those foundations, change some of those mindsets, create some of those institutions. And this is where I think the institutions become very important. And when I talk about institutions, not just from a formal perspective, but from an informal perspective as well.
Yeah. Okay, Elona, your hand is up, and it should be Elona, Regina, and then Sarah. So Elona.
I think I concur with a lot of what everyone is saying. And I think one of the things that's coming through is the mindset and the cultural framework within which that mindset was developed. So if we look, for example, at social identity theory, women have been socialized in their communities. What are they seeing as they grow up in terms of women entrepreneurship? So to your question of, is it a disadvantage? I think sometimes we've got to ask, there's a research that's been done recently, and it found that a lot of women's concept of entrepreneurial success is so divergent from each other. You know, from the time that I start my business, what's actually my goal? What am I going to measure myself as in terms of success? And then you have us, the researchers, looking and saying a successful business is measured by 1, 2, 3. And you find that the entrepreneur herself did not even aim for that. And for them, in their context and in their minds, they are successful because they've ticked off what they set out to do in the business. So we need to marry the two to say, number one, they socialize a certain way. And so that means if we're trying to change that socialization, we need to start to think about what representation is out there. What is the narrative that we're putting out there about women entrepreneurship as a career option, right? In some spaces, it is a backup. You couldn't get a real job, and so you started a business. So how do we start to change those narratives? And can we start to step towards to an understanding what is the concept of women success and how do they perceive their success? Where do they want to go? Because depending on life stages, some of them said, well, I don't actually want to work more than I did in corporate at the moment. And so many other choices that they've got to make. And so I think parallel to the conversation around the growth and sustainability of some of these businesses is really understanding what does success mean in their context and what would their identity as a woman entrepreneur mean. And I think it would be similar across the region, but there's obviously differences specific to our countries.
Okay, Regina?
This was an accidental hand. I just wanted to clap to what was said before.
Okay.
Thank
All right,
you.
and Sarah then?
Okay, so I was thinking about this, and I've had about women and whether they are disadvantaged or advantaged in entrepreneurship. And there's one answer, which is my very personal perspective, that women are naturally good at running businesses because we are good at creating things and feeling creative. And you will find so many entrepreneurs of both genders will think of an entrepreneurial project as something they have grown and nurtured and developed. And it's not unlike people's thoughts about sort of raising children. So I feel that there is actually a very close link between women's nurturing capacity and their entrepreneurial capabilities. However, having said that, I think that some of those gendered sort of socialization processes that other speakers have been talking about sort of manifest themselves in pretty much every single context, but in slightly different ways. And one of the things I've noticed in the UK and probably in other places as well is that women, that gendering thing can exist at a very basic level of just about issues about things like money and earning income, and women being scared of appearing greedy or appearing self-interested, and particularly maybe in the context of opportunity entrepreneurship, which probably defines the majority of entrepreneurs in the UK, given that there are often quite a lot of other economic opportunities for them. And what we're seeing in the UK at the moment is that women feel very sort of pressured by a lot of the public narratives to express their entrepreneurial goals in terms of helping other people, in terms of creating community value, in terms of doing good for society, as opposed to just say, well, I just want to make some money and earn a decent living. And that can also be a kind of gendered constraint on women, because social enterprise, of which there are 100,000 social enterprises in the UK. I mean, that's another conversation altogether about sort of neoliberal governments that are pushing care work into the private sector. But if women are encouraged to open social enterprises, which a lot of them are now, there's difficulties in getting funding for that. There's difficulties in actually developing. It's actually quite hard to develop some of those business models where you're actually able to create a profitable business and create social value as well. I know it all sounds great and it is what we should all be aiming for, but it's also quite difficult. And so it's almost like women are being extra burdened with this social responsibility that's a sort of gendered responsibility as well. So those are just some other thoughts that I wanted to add to this conversation about how those sort of gendered constraints sort of work through in lots of different contexts. And certainly in the UK, women are expected to do the majority of caring. Although men are increasingly expected to be active parents, when it comes down to it, when the telephone goes and they say so-and-so's got a temperature, or, you know, or the other thing, or in my case, has jumped the school fence and is running loose in Hackney, you know, I'm the one that has to go off and deal with it. So those things. And then one more point on that is only about 20% of women actually give up or actually start businesses in the UK specifically to accommodate that caring work. We're seeing an awful lot of women going into entrepreneurship at a different stage in their lives when their children are older. Maybe they don't have so much demands on them. So it's a real sort of lazy shorthand for bankers and any potential investors to sort of say that women are not a good recipient of their investment income because of potential caring issues, because many of them have actually got beyond, are in a different stage altogether.
That's an interesting one, because from the sub-Saharan African point of view, women don't go into business in their old age. So when that time is when their children take care of them. It's time for them to relax and do nothing and let the children take care of them, not to start a new business. So most of the times when you see elderly people doing business, they started it for a long time. They trained their children doing that business and they carry on, but not really to start something after retiring from corporate work. That's a new one. I think we need to start doing research on that to see if there is a new shift in our region, to see if that is also the case. But Joan, your hand has been up, and then Hurriye.
Hi, I didn't know whether you wanted contributions from the floor, so I put my hand up and then took it down again. And when I thought, then Regina said she put her hand up, and I thought, oh, it's okay. So if it's all right for me to contribute, I'd love to. Thank you, everybody. It's really, really interesting listening to your thoughts. And a couple of things, I'll be very quick. I've thrown some things into the chat more as provocations than as things that I really believe in. But just listening to all of you, it seems to me that there are some very universal principles that are applicable to women generally. You know, entrepreneurial intention is high in the vast majority, in many places. Self-efficacy is low in many places. So we want to, but we don't necessarily feel we've got the self-belief to do it. When I did some work in the West Midlands, it very much echoes what you've said, Sarah. I found that women, when in times of economic buoyancy, were willing to take a chance on entrepreneurship, but in times of economic downturn, very much preferred to have a job than to work for someone else. And when you're looking at women in the global south, the prevalence of necessity-based entrepreneurship is by far and away the biggest grouping, isn't it? And I think many of those women, based on some of the work that we've done, would prefer to have a job than actually make a job, because they really want the stability and the formality and the regularity of an income. And yet we see we see lots of anomalies around that with you mentioned the Nigerian women that we looked at who were reluctant entrepreneurs. They were the no choicers who would really far rather have a job, but their husband said you can't. So I just think, I'm throwing this out to you. Wouldn't it be great if we had some universal concepts that we said these are applicable to women generally, and one of them being that our social and our economic impact as mothers or wives or carers is never going to be counted as part of economic good. And it really ought to be, because I think, Ade, you said it, it is an economic good to produce children for the future of our country, but no one ever wants to pay any attention to that. There's lots of things we're expected to do for gratis, never going to be counted, never going to be regarded as economic value. But at the same time, this massive, pressure on all of us to be seen to be wanting to be entrepreneurs. Well, let's face it, lots of women just want some economic, they want some stability, they want some economic independence, and to think about, if we've got these universal concepts that will apply generally, globally, if you like, then look at the nuances between the global north and the global south. And, they seem to me to be really bit large as well. So it's not really a question, just thoughts on what you've said, sort of echoing them back to you. And I would welcome your thoughts on that.
It's interesting, really. Huri, I'm coming to you now. I don't know if any of you heard recently, I think there was one country that was going to make it mandatory for women to give birth, because it was I think one of the countries, because they're saying that the women are not having as many children and their workforce was depleting. So they were contemplating passing a law to make it mandatory for women to have more children. So just like you said, so if that is, China, I think it was China, someone in the audience has I've told. So if that is such a big deal, if it's such a valuable contribution, how come it is not recognized as an economic activity as such? That's a question that Joan was posing there. Hurie, your hand is up. Yeah. Hurie?
Oh, hello. Thank you so very much, Bridget. I was going to follow up on Khatija's comments. I think I would like to say thank you. I mean, thank you, Khatija. I was thinking about whether this gendered constraint actually is helping us more than sometimes actually creating a lot of another, I would say, gendered constraint. When it comes to the narrative of women's deficit or women's necessity entrepreneurship or women's issues and problems, that we are trying to make ourselves heard, I think, very loudly. And I think we have done, I mean, to some great extent, actually, we have made this. And I believe that maybe gender inequality is a really an important and helpful concept for us. But what if I think we can start considering going a little bit beyond that? And I think there is also, of course, issues around the power relations, and gender relations are power relations, of course. But what if that we should try to see women or repositioning women as powerful as well? I mean, with all those narratives going on, I think we are really risking women remaining at this powerless position, and it hurts. And it makes me angry, and it hurts. And I'm really thinking whether we can find some ways. And I think there is no one answer. And from the Khatija's the voice that I could hear that. I mean, there are several. I think every aspect of this system, I would say, institutional system, in scholarship, in academia, in practice, in NGOs, and everywhere that we can reach. I think we need this narrative change. First of all, I think we have been, of course, making a lot of noise, but I think we might start making noise and showing that we are not powerless people, and we have a lot of constraints, but we are doing very, very good things. Actually, we are not resilient despite the constraints we have. Of course, despite the constraints, that we are very resilient. That is for sure. I have no problem with that. But I think we are also powerful, and I think we are not bringing that to the front, I think, enough. And I think we should We should do that, and we should start doing that a little bit better, even starting with the conceptualization. For example, Khadija was saying that necessity entrepreneurship and opportunity entrepreneurship, that we are comparing, contrasting these two things because these two things are valued very differently. When it comes to the necessity entrepreneurship, it is undervalued. And compared to opportunity entrepreneurship, why is that? Maybe there is also, lots of power relations going on around that, because this is very Western, very, very, post-colonial, I would say, understanding of entrepreneurship per se that we are dealing in here, so that still we are talking women's entrepreneurship from, I would say, a white perspective most of the time. So I think there are so many different issues, but despite issues, I believe that we can be a little bit louder in talking about women's powerful positions as entrepreneurs. And again, thank you so very much, Khadija Tao, for opening that. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution. Well, I'm going to move on to the next question quickly, but before I go to the next question, it's this issue that you have raised, and someone else has put that in the chat as well, this issue of power relations. So yes, there's no way men will say women are not resilient. There's no way they'll say women are not creative. There is no way they'll say women cannot do business, because they know it's not true. And that is not, but the issue there is we don't have enough voices speaking about our will I say adventures, or about what we do. And that brings me to the point, feminism, the movement we call feminism, actually did not really gain any traction until men came into the discourse, until some men identified themselves as feminists. Some men started writing about women's issues. Men started talking about women. That's when the feminist movement actually gained a lot of traction. There cannot be substantive change without bringing men into the discourse. And that's why I'm happy that we have a lot of men in the meeting today. It starts with those people up there at the banks, for instance. They have wives, they have daughters. But if we can all change the way we view women as homogeneous group, okay, and we begin to see the capacities and women as a resource. Telling women to go and give birth is because you already see them as a resource for development. Okay, so if you begin to see them as an economic resource as well, and change the narrative of only seeing us as useful in the kitchen, useful as mothers, useful as homemakers, then that is when the shift will actually begin to change. And which is why it's good that a lot of women networks are coming up. So we need to start speaking more. The narrative that is out there, we need to control it more. Some men are still afraid of women today. You wouldn't even believe it. I listened to the news a few days ago, and they were interviewing one man and why they wanted to go back in America to the 1860-something law. And he actually said on national TV, he said, women have become too mouthy. They talk too much. So we need to shut them up and take them back. So you can see that a lot of people are not comfortable with the change, but when more men begin to take up this cause and speak, then you actually begin to see the change occur. Which brings me now to the final question of the day. Given all of these things that we've talked about, do we think entrepreneurship is the best career choice for women? And I'm going to give everyone a chance to speak. I'm going to start with Elona. Entrepreneurship, is that the best career choice for women in South Africa?
I'm so conflicted by your question because, as a coach, I say what is best for you is what you choose, because that's where you're going to flourish. So I think it needs to be positioned definitely as a career choice, because there's a lot of focus on developing women and supporting them on the growth path. But whether it is the best will be determined by the women that are seeking it. I saw a very good comment on, if I just want to latch on that, Joan said, if you are in charge of determining what counts, you have power of the narrative. So I think in whichever way we're developing women, let's say specifically women entrepreneurs, we need to be targeting specifically what is the story that they're telling themselves on that journey? What is the story they're telling themselves, and what is the narrative that they are mirroring from their society? So while you speak about that, there's an uprising, there's a lot more women taking up space and starting their businesses, growing their businesses. There's also quite a bit of pushback. I had a conversation with a gentleman in South Africa also saying the same thing, that his partner earns more than him and he's not comfortable and is culturally wrong. So we are not, yes, he was quite upset that this women empowerment is enough now, because now the women are earning more. So we need to not look at the development in isolation of the communities in which it is happening, because unfortunately, sometimes the women start to have to become victims of gender-based violence based on the cultural norms in the areas in which they're in, and we need to take all of that into account. It's a brilliant career choice, but we need a systemic approach to support and develop sustainable women entrepreneurs.
Okay, Dr. Adeyeye.
Thank you very much. Going to your question, that is entrepreneurship the best career choice for women? I think building on what Eloda has said, it's a matter of choice. Choice for those women that want to go into, for the women that want to go into entrepreneurship as the source of their income. And I want us to know that, women are human, and women's rights are women's rights. And economic rights, the right to economic empowerment, the right to be able to make decisions and to add to one's life should be a right for everybody, not just for men, not just for some people that are attached as the breadwinner, because a woman is a woman and we should give them the opportunity. So for women that have made the decision, to use entrepreneurship as their choice of economic empowerment or economic livelihood, I think what we need to do, what the government needs to do, what stakeholders need to do is to create the enabling environment for them, to make them to thrive, to make them to go forward in that choice that they have made. Because we will say, looking at we keep having intervention that will improve women in so-called area that we believe is their role. But economic rights and the rights to a good living should be a concept that we allow people to go into, and we allow them, we give them the good environment, the structure that will make them to thrive and even to be empowered in it. So if a woman has decided that she would like to be an entrepreneur, that is a career choice, I think what we need to do in whatever position we are in regards to entrepreneurship is for us to give them the maximum support, to put in place strategies, is to remove all barriers and limitations that can limit them in that career, in that choice that they have made.
Thank you. Dr. Sarah.
Okay, so in an ideal world, entrepreneurship would be a great career choice for women. But where is this ideal world? It's certainly not in the UK. So in a context where women don't have access to the resources that they need, to similar flows of funding, and possibly not having a supportive alternative income earner at home, I would say that entrepreneurship is not a good career choice for women. And that's not to say that I don't think that women are good at entrepreneurship. I think women are brilliant entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurship is not brilliant for women, and certainly not for women's equality.
Okay.
So and I hope that doesn't bring too much of a downer on things, because I am not anti-entrepreneurship, and I am not saying that women don't make great entrepreneurs.
Okay, I'll come back to that again. Khadijatu, please, in the meantime, I have put a link on the chat. We'd like to hear from you what topic you want us. This is a series that we have every 2 months. So we usually ask the audience to give us an idea what they want us to talk about next. So I've put a link there. If you just follow and help us to choose what next we'll be talking about in the next webinar. So Khadijatu.
Yeah, I think I maybe differ to what Sarah has said in terms of whether entrepreneurship is a career choice. I would say definitely it's a good career choice for women. And drawing on some of the things that we've just mentioned earlier on in terms of what's the narrative. Often when we talk about entrepreneurship, we tend to focus a lot on opportunity-based entrepreneurship. But I always like to emphasize that there's a lot women are doing in the informal sector. There's a lot that women are doing when we look at necessity-based entrepreneurship. And when I think about the Gambia as an example, despite the fact that we don't talk about some of these, when we talk about entrepreneurship and the impact that women are making, I've seen women in the Gambia that have like very micro businesses in the informal sector that have trained individuals at universities. And these are things that are not often brought into the discourse or discussion around women in entrepreneurship and the sort of impact that they can create. So recognizing the fact that there are a lot of challenges, most of which we've already talked about, and the differences in terms of the power relations. Regardless of these challenges, there was a Forbes article that I was reading at I think sometime last week or so, that was talking about how businesses that are founded by women tend to generate more revenue when you compare that to businesses that are founded by men. So that tells a lot about the capabilities that women have to generate or create, as well as capture and deliver value.
Okay. Felicia, you have worked with women in different countries. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is more my personal opinion, but I think at the end of the day, it really depends on individual preferences of each one of us. And it also goes back to what Elona said before, that like, yeah, it's about personal goals and what we want to achieve with our careers. And we don't have to kind of, define entrepreneurship in the light of only like high growth entrepreneurship is the type of entrepreneurship that is valuable to women's lives, because it's not. So it really goes back to personal preferences. And I really liked also what Huria said, that we women are powerful people and we do great things despite all the constraints and challenges that we are facing. And I do believe entrepreneurship is a great career choice. But yeah, as it was highlighted several times, systemic change is needed, and an enabling environment for women and all kinds of women in all their diversity to flourish and succeed. And here also calling really to an intersectional approach to entrepreneurship.
Okay, so finally, sorry. Fine. I wanted to pick you up on everything that all of you said. I've seen your hand, Charlotte. I'll come back to you. I want to pick you up on what everyone said. In everything that you've said so far, there was a key word there: choice. Choice. But the stories we've told today, I've seen that women really have very little choice in whether they become entrepreneurs or not. Some of them have become entrepreneurs out of necessity. That is not a choice. Which means if they were given a choice, they might have chosen other things to do. So should we then rethink the policies? We have some men here. Should we then rethink, one, the policies, two, how we socialize our women? I've seen a lot of the chat there. The study that was done in South Africa, Professor Matibi, she made a comment in the chat box and she said they did a study in South Africa about Nigerian women, and that the response was varied. Some women feel that the care work is not they don't see it as unpaid work. They see it as their responsibility to care for their families, to care for their children, because we've been groomed, socialized to believe that a role of care belongs to the woman. Even look at the sector, the care sector, it's made up of more women. Look at the hospitality sector. it's more women. So do we need to change the way we socialize girls? Do we need to change policies? Do we need to provide more opportunities for alternative career choices for women? And then we can really see the ones that chose entrepreneurship or versus the ones that entrepreneurship was the only option. Because then there's no choice. If you have to choose between A and A, you really don't have any much choice. Okay, Charlotte, what's your hand was up, Charlotte?
Okay, yes, just my input as also an entrepreneur for a few years. What I can see, I mean, from my personal experience and also from my observation, is that there are, let me say, 4 main points in terms of whether enhancing or inhibiting women entrepreneurship. I think, first of all, there's the macro environment, like the institutional context. So you do have countries whereby entrepreneurship is part of the culture. It is, everybody does entrepreneurship. Women, they start businesses, and it's actually normal. And then I can say also at the community level, it's going to depend on at the community level, how is it perceived? And also the family situation. So, of course, a woman can choose, but at the end of the day, if this woman has a family, has a husband, it's going to depend on whether the husband is supportive or not. Because in some situations, you have a woman who's allowed, let me say, the husband is okay for her to start a business, but not to go up to a certain level, just something to occupy her and to bring in a little bit of money. But it may be difficult for her to develop the business and be very busy, because of course, when you have a business, when it's growing, it's going to take up more of your time, and you are absent from the home. You can't fulfill some duties as a mom, as a wife. So I think at the end of the day, it's going to be like dependent on the micro environment of the woman. So I'm seeing this as an aspect for education, and I'm thinking that as we are I mean, the economy these days is quite difficult. It's not like how things used to be. Perhaps as we continue, it will be more and more acceptable for women to go into business and to create amazing companies, and the husbands would be comfortable with that because there are less and less jobs. So maybe in terms of entrepreneurial education from a young age, young girls, projects within schools, we normalize that everyone, boys and girls, are allowed to dream big, to start big companies. In South Africa, the women I interviewed, for example, they are developing apps. They are in the tech, so there is progress there. Yeah, so yeah, that's my input. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually think that when it comes down to giving women choice, a lot of them might choose to be entrepreneurs, really. If the resources were there, actually more women would choose to be entrepreneurs if the resources were there. Like Sarah said, women are very creative in so many different ways. So adding that to education, I think the Finland approach, teaching entrepreneurship from primary school. So actually, when they decide, it's a decision that they have made that they want to be entrepreneurs, but not to become an entrepreneur because I couldn't find a job, because I need to go on maternity leave and they won't give me maternity leave, and I need to earn an income to take care of my family. So all of those reasons don't prepare them for the journey. And that's why when you talk about performance and when you say men perform better than women, then the question becomes, what is the motivation for them becoming entrepreneurs? How did they become entrepreneurs? and what are the resources available for them to take their businesses to the next level. We do have men today. Is anyone going to talk? I did see the hand of somebody up at some point. We'd like to hear from you. What are your takes and what are your views on all of the discussions that we've been having? Anyone is okay to talk? Mr. Frank? Dr. Frank, let me say. And we still have Dr. Abiodun in the house, still in the group today. Yes, Dr. Abiodun Egbetukun, I'm calling you now. I'm picking on you. He was the first person that registered for this event. The first day the flyer came out, he registered. So you get to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I wasn't expecting to have to speak. I mean, I just came to listen and learn, and it's quite interesting because a good number of the speakers are people whom I know. Felicia, and Dr. Jumoke Adeyeye. And of course, you, I know. I mean, it's quite interesting, and I'm excited to hear all the different perspectives and the quite inspiring initiatives and all of the activities that go on in different aspects of the endeavors of each of the speakers and everyone who has contributed. What I find interesting actually in the conversation is the discussion about whether entrepreneurship is should be a career choice for women. And from the perspective of an economist and someone with a multidisciplinary background, having studied engineering, technology management, economics, and now teaching business management, I've traversed pretty much all the domains of academic endeavor. And I can tell you for a fact that that question has no simple answer, okay? First, it depends on what context you're looking at. Mm-hmm. Secondly, it depends on how you define entrepreneurship itself. And thirdly, I think it depends on what you mean by career choice. But broadly, and here's my opinion, purely my opinion, broadly, I do think that in a sense, women more than men do not have a lot of options in a sense. And here's what I mean by that. So if we think about entrepreneurship at the most basic level as being able to creatively get things done despite being relatively under-resourced, it then comes to mind that pretty much every day, in almost every context that they operate, women are relatively under-resourced compared to their male counterparts. And the fact that they still get things done, sometimes at the same level and sometimes even better than their male counterparts, means that entrepreneurial decision-making, entrepreneurial performance is foisted upon the women, not because of their own making, but simply because of the differences that exist and, social norms and perceptions and all that. So I think that this kind of contextualization is important when we think about whether entrepreneurship should be a career option for women or not. In closing, let me say that I would encourage women to be a lot more entrepreneurial. And the reason is there is research that says that there are relatively fewer women in management globally, irrespective of the industry you look at. But more often than not, when women are in leadership, they tend to do better than their male counterparts for many reasons, and I don't want to go into the details of that, but that alone should be a note of encouragement for women to embrace entrepreneurship. Whether as a career option or not, I wouldn't want to say, but generally, I don't think there should be any reason why women should feel discouraged from choosing entrepreneurship. If they want it as a career option, why not? If they want it as a side hustle, why not? Okay, so those are my thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Felicia, I'm going to give you the floor for the last question, but I want to ask the audience first if there's anyone else who wants to contribute. Does anyone else want to contribute to the discussion before we hand the floor over to Felicia to tell us how we can get some of this research, some of this information that we're gathering. How do we get this information to the decision makers? That is our, so you can ponder on that, and while we wait for any other contribution. Any contribution from anyone else? Okay, so given your work with the World Bank and you people are supporting, gathering data from different countries, trying to provide support from different countries, there is a lot of research that is going on about women entrepreneurs from the different countries, the kind of support that they need, the actual kind of areas where they are more effective and all that. How does all this information get into the hands of the policymakers, the people who are making decisions concerning women? Because you can see that there needs to be more tailored policies, tailored supports to provide, to actually even provide that choice. More, how do you choose, how do you make a decision whether to employ a woman or not based on the fact that she might go on maternity leave? Such things. So how can these changes come?
Thanks a lot for this great question, Bridget. And I believe you made a very important point about how to better use research and evidence to design more effective support programs and policies. And actually, like in the work that I'm doing at WeFi, we are doing exactly this. We think about how we can strengthen research practitioner collaboration in order to make sure that researchers address the most pressing evidence gaps that practitioners basically need answers for. And on the other side, that the evidence that is created by researchers can be used by policymakers to inform policy making, right? And it's just so important that like this collaboration is strengthened because right now, I guess there are still many gaps. And particularly when it comes to women's entrepreneurship and women-led SMEs, we have seen that there is just limited evidence at this nexus out there. So I believe we really need to have more coordinated efforts there to make sure that the programs and support, like the support programs and policies are evidence-based, right? And for example, just to give you an example, but last year we organized our first WeFi research conference in collaboration also with with EBRD in London. And our goal for this research conference was, first of all, to like present new evidence from new evidence on women's entrepreneurship in general, but specifically on access to financing, but then also to strengthen research practitioner collaboration. So that was really unique to our conference, I believe, and we are going to have another conference this year again. So I would strongly encourage all of you to be on the watch out for the call for papers now in May and submit your great papers. But yeah, in that conference, we also included a kind of what we call matchmaking session, where we match the researchers with the practitioners to work on new research, or to work on concepts for new research proposals. That's just as an example of how we try to promote that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all the speakers and to everyone who made the time to take part in this discussion today. We do not take for granted. 2 hours of your time is quite a lot. So thank you so much for making out the time. Khadijatu, Felicia, Sarah, Elona, and Dr. Jumoke, thank you so much. To everyone who made the time to attend also, thank you so much. And I look forward to continuing this conversation offline. So if you have any ideas, please, only 6 people have completed our survey. Please, let's see the topics that we were thinking about talking next one. So we're looking at gender gap in sustainability, motherhood, everyday care work, and social care protection for women, banking on women, the challenges, sexual harassment in the marketplace. By this marketplace, we mean the informal marketplace. So we have had cases in Kenya where women are asked for sex in order to be given a space to put their goods in the market. So there is a lot of that going on in different areas as well. So let us know what you want us to focus on in the next webinar. And so there are 10 topics there. So give us your vote, and then the next webinar will be in June. You will all be informed ahead of time when the topics have been chosen. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording now. Oh, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bridget.
Have a good day, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Felicia, it was good to see you again, Dr. Ade. You, Dr.
Thank you, Dr. Abiodun.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, John. You look lovely today.
Hi, Bridget. Sorry, I've been lying in bed. I had a root canal yesterday, so I've been in pain. I couldn't talk.
Oh, Sunita,
Yeah.
sorry. Are
No,
you
it's
feeling
okay.
better?
I've been listening. It's been really interesting, but I'm on high on cocodamol.
Oh,
So,
sorry.
but it was very interesting. The whole thing was very interesting talk. But thank you so much, and I'll see you guys. I'm going to go back to bed.